Welcome, everybody. Please edit your name to put FS at the beginning if you're a faculty senator, including steering, and G if you are anybody else, please. And that way we'll have the recognition of guests by how they appear in the participants and under their names. And that will save us some time. And Laurie, would you please send out the Qualtrics, and everybody look in your email. There will be a Qualtrics survey, which is just an attendance. If you can click there to indicate your participation, that will save us some time.
It's already there, so.
Great. And if you're just joining us, please put FS in front of your name. Right click on your name anywhere you see it and put FS in front if you're a faculty senator and G in front if you're a guest. And that way we'll see in the participants who's a senator and who's a guest, and that will help us with voting. We'll be able to see which votes to count. And I see we still have people joining. We're up to about 70 people. And there is a chat feature, and I'm waiting in the chat to see when we have a quorum. Laurie will let us know there.
Joe, we have a quorum.
We do have a quorum?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, Laurie. So I call this meeting to order. We've had our roll call. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of April 16th, which was our elections meeting. Are there any, do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. I hear a motion and a second. Are there any discussion or amendments to the minutes of April 16th? Any discussion or amendments? All right, I still see a number of people in the participants who don't have anything in front of their name, and we're going to have to take a vote here. So please, if you have not already, put FS at the beginning of your name by right-clicking on your name wherever you see it, and then editing your name to have FS if you're a faculty senator, or G if you're a guest. And any of the hosts can please go ahead and make those edits for people if you know who they are. All right. Hearing no further discussion, let's move to a vote. The voting will happen today using the yes and no buttons in the participants. So click on participants and the bottom you'll see a green check for yes, a red X for no. And if you are in favor of approving the minutes, please click on the yes. Otherwise, if you're opposed, please click on the no. If you wish to abstain, don't do anything. And this is only for senators, although I can see who has FS in front of their name. We've got a small number of people at the top of the participants that don't have a prefix. Brett Meltzer, Christine Dellert.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out. This is Brett Meltzer. I'm on my phone. I'm not sure how to do it that way.
Okay, who spoke? Who's on the phone?
That's Brett Meltzer.
I see you twice, once on the phone and once, if you're a senator, please put, oh, you can't do it. Lori, maybe you could do it for him.
Yeah, thank you. Brett Meltzer.
Brett, are you a senator?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I can do it. I've got it.
Thank you again.
All right, I see lots of green check marks and no opposed. So the minutes are approved for April 16th. Now the minutes for May 18th. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of May 18th?
So moved.
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. Let's clear. I'm going to clear all. All right. Any discussion on the minutes of May 18th? Any discussion on the minutes of May 18th? Hearing none. Let's vote. Again, green is approval and red is not, and don't do anything if you wish to abstain. A good reason to abstain would be if you weren't there.
I'm sorry, I can't see the green and red. So where is that going to be?
In the participants. So click on participants at the bottom of your screen. At the very bottom of the participants, you should see a green yes and a red no.
Sure, got it. Thank you.
Sure thing. Those of you who are guests, if you would edit your office or something indicating who you are afterwards, that will help us in a moment. So for example, I see Maribeth Ehas, SDES. And I see a few folks at the bottom of participants. If you have just joined us, please put an FS in front of your name if you're a faculty senator and a G if you're a guest. And looking at the vote, I see lots of green and no red. So the minutes of May 18th are approved. Looking at so we now move to the recognition of guests. I'll do my best here. Please help me out if I don't identify your name or your office properly. I see, just going down the list in order, Allison Hurtado from Faculty Excellence, Christine Dellert from the Office of the President, Joel Hartman from IT&R, Judy Coons. I don't know, Judy, what libraries. Lucretia Cooney from Faculty Excellence, S. Kent Butler, our Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Officer, Alex Cartwright, President, Elizabeth Hamilton, Administrative, and it runs off. can you help us out?
Administrative Affairs.
Thank you. Elizabeth Klonoff, VP for Research and Dean of Graduate Studies. Janet Jasinski from Faculty Excellence. Michael Dyken from Student Health Services. Michael Johnson, the interim provost. Rich Gauss from the libraries. Tom Kavanaugh from Digital Learning. Theodore Berry, our Dean of Undergraduate Studies. The list just jumped for me. Somebody must have come in because I now have to find the place where I had. There we go. Sal Deng from the libraries. Lyman Brody from College of Arts and Humanities. And I see Nancy Marshall and Nina Orlovskaya. Are you senators or are you guests? I know Nina, of course, is a senator. Please rename so either it says G or FS. Okay.
Nancy Marshall, I'm a senator.
Thank you. And I saw that you renamed now. All right. So are there any guests that I did not recognize? Do we have a student participant? I was told there would be one.
I am here.
All right. And who is I who just spoke?
Rodney Graham.
Okay, Rodney, as a student participant, you're actually not a Faculty Senate member, so you are a guest. And Rodney is, but you have floor privileges to speak under our Constitution. And we've not often had a student representative, so I'm hoping that we continue to have somebody here representing student government. So please identify yourself as a guest instead of.
Okay, I would change that.
And are there any other guests that I did not recognize?
Chair Harrington, Joe Adams, Office of the Provost.
Thank you. All right, and Lori, if you can, at the bottom of the participants, identify the remaining people so that they have a G or an FS in front of their name. I see Nina, Nancy, our senators. Lyman Brody has a guest, but his G is afterwards. If you can put that at the beginning, it'll sort properly in the participants. And we are going to take some votes later, so that will help us out. All right, we move now to announcements. The only announcement I have is that we will have a meeting of the full Senate on June 9th and another meeting, July 9th, and another meeting of the full Senate on August 5th. And there will be steering meetings before then as well. Report of the chair, which is kind of wrapped up in the same thing. So my question about exactly what meeting to transact this summer, I believe we had a pretty strong sense that we wanted to do the things that were urgent, but not to reactivate committees. We do have some pending resolutions that we could pick up at the end of, as part of old business. And so I'm going to clear, this is just asking a sense of the Senate here. If you're a senator and you favor picking up, these are mostly bylaws amendments that required a waiting period and so forth. We could vote on those in July or August, or we could wait until September to handle those. I think it might be easier to handle them in July and August because some of them have to do with the composition of committees. So if you're in favor of handling the resolutions that have to do with bylaw changes or other changes to our documents, please vote yes or no. And this is just a sense, I'm doing this to see what people want to do here. This is not formal or binding. This is actually a steering decision, but I want steering to see what people are thinking.
Yo, you do break out a little bit. So yes means what and no means what?
Yes means we should pick up those resolutions that have to do with changing the bylaws, and especially those that have to do with changing the composition of committees. And the reason to do it would be that it would help to form our committees for the fall. And the reason not to do it is we already have too much to do in the summer and some people aren't appointed and that sort of thing. I'm seeing roughly even numbers. If we can get a count, Lori and Christine, if you would please count yeses and nos independently and we can compare afterwards. And other than that, my only report item is we have now appointed, I think, something in the neighborhood of about 20 faculty members to administrative committees ranging from global to all kinds of things having to do with COVID. And that's been that and organizing a lot of meetings and the open forum and so forth have been the main activities of the leadership. Let's move to the report of the president.
Thank you, Joe. I know you have a very full agenda, so I'm going to keep my comments short. And today I'm here more to listen to the conversation that you're going to have. But first, I'd like to briefly address our return to campus planning efforts. I want to thank the Faculty Senate for your active engagement. And I want to specifically thank those who provided all the feedback and input into that draft plan, which you'll hear more about from Provost Johnson shortly. I certainly also want to thank Chair Harrington for moderating yesterday's virtual conversation and those who attended virtually yesterday. Faculty, staff, and student voices are critical in institutional decision-making, and your input has made our planning
Can you hear me out there? Yes. Okay, thank you. So could someone point out to me where we were?
Okay. I think I'll continue now. Your input has certainly made our planning process better, and we'll continue to refine as we receive feedback through the end of this week. As you know, we'll be taking the plan to the Board of Trustees at the meeting next week. And then, of course, it's going to be presented to the Florida Board of Governors during an in-person meeting at UCF on June 23rd. We stressed yesterday, and I want to stress it again today, that we are all in this together, and we need to focus on how do we help to protect our community. And that means that we have to focus on compassion and flexibility for everybody involved. And I thank you for your working with us, and I thank you for continuing to do everything we can to execute this as effectively as we can. So yesterday I also talked about all of the additional stress that people are under, emotional, personal, financial stress, certainly because of the pandemic, but also, and very importantly, issues of racial and social injustice weigh heavily upon us right now. It's incredible to see the peaceful demonstrations and activism that's taking place across the nation these past weeks, and I'm glad that the Faculty Senate is taking up this critical topic of racism, and I'm very much looking forward to your conversation today. And I appreciate that you invited Dr. Butler to speak with you today also. And as many people have pointed out, inclusion is more than words. It is about action. And I want us to continue to be actively involved in changing and becoming better. Before and after last Friday's forum on race and unity, we had the opportunity to talk with more of our faculty and staff and students, and we met with student groups who represent our Black and underrepresented communities, and we talked about what action they'd want to see. And there are several of the topics. There's a lot more than this that came out of that, but there's several that definitely resonated with me. And I'll highlight those, but I'm not going to limit what we do to just these, but there's a need for required education and training, specifically focused on multicultural competence and sensitivity. We need to look at how we educate our search committees. How do we understand implicit bias? How does that play into our ability to hire the best people that we can hire? That needs to be addressed. We need to think about structures and mechanisms to celebrate our diversity. embracing it and creating an inclusive environment where everyone knows that UCF is their home, their university. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Everybody here needs to embrace this inclusive excellence, and any training that we require is for everyone, including starting, of course, with my senior leadership. There's also an expectation that we think about our reporting system and how do we review that and potentially overhaul it so that everyone knows how to report, but also are comfortable reporting, and that they understand that we will actually follow up on those reports of injustice. We will commit to increasing representation within our faculty, staff, and leadership across this university. And certainly there's a desire that we continue those conversations around race and unity. And I look forward to us doing that. There's much more that we could talk about, but those are sort of the immediate things that come to mind. And it's clear to me that we must do better at UCF. And I want to thank all of you for remaining engaged in this important process and recognizing that continuous improvement is needed, and we need to be committed to that and moving this institution forward. At the same time, we have an extremely complicated and difficult situation we're facing in our campus community that has caused anxiety and anger here and elsewhere, and that is Associate Professor Nagy's personal social media tweets. I know Provost Johnson will touch on this more, but I want to be clear on our position. We've condemned Dr. Nagy's views in the strongest terms. They do not reflect UCF's values. And personally, I find these tweets hurtful. I find them disturbing. I find them abhorrent. They're not what I want to see people propagating. The complication is that we're in an institution that must uphold freedom of speech and principles of academic freedom. But I also want to emphasize that while we must uphold these, any discriminatory actions in the workplace by anyone at this institution are a different matter. No one's views should lead them to mistreat our employees or any employee, our students or any employee in a university environment. That is not protected, and that is not free speech. And when we receive those complaints, we will follow up on those complaints. And we will look at any complaints of possible discriminatory behavior in the classroom. And certainly that's why an inquiry was launched last week. We understand and have heard from many who are frustrated. Many are frustrated that we couldn't act more quickly. And I understand why people are frustrated. But there is this process that we follow within the university setting that takes time. And I'm committed to us getting through that and looking at everything that we do. What this situation has shown me is that we need to do a better job promoting a culture of accountability and inclusion. We need to empower and help educate people on how to speak out and report something that's not right, and to hold each other accountable when we witness or know of behavior that's not appropriate. Again, I've committed to us looking at our systems for reporting and the ways that we're supporting our faculty and our students on issues of racism and bias. And coming out of Friday's forum, I listed a number of things earlier that we are planning on following up on: the training, required training, working with search committees, thinking about how we become better as an institution and how we move forward. And I want to continue to think about our communications. How do we continue to talk about what is happening at this institution and how we continue to get better at communicating what's going on? And I certainly look forward to hearing from you about what your ideas are and where we can take significant action. And none of these are issues that'll be solved overnight. It takes a sustained commitment and a concerted effort to make positive change. And it is something we must do together for the benefit of the students and our entire campus community. It is something that is near and dear to the hearts of our faculty. And we have to think very carefully about how we go about any activity in this area. I will end my comments there, and we're ready to listen and to answer any questions you have. And again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for everything you've done over the last several months. I know how hard you've been working. I want to thank you for continuing to have meetings during the summer when other things, you generally might be focused on other things. I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate all the commitment to this university. I know this university is better because of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. I want to ask first for those who are, Lori and Christine, do you have vote counts from previously? I'd like to clear the board.
I've got it.
Thank you. All right, I saw one hand raised. It was Dr. Proctor. Before you begin, Dr. Proctor, we have an extended discussion on race. We have an extended discussion on COVID. So in order to get to those, we will lose Kent Butler at 1 o'clock to another meeting. I would like to entertain only questions related to things other than race or COVID. And we'll handle the race and COVID questions. You can direct them to the president when we get to those sections of the meeting.
This was on communications.
Yes, please.
On communications, a suggestion. Since the return to campus virtual form was so successful, a suggestion in September, when all the students, faculty, and staff have returned to campus, I would ask you, the president, to consider setting up a virtual forum on racism involving perhaps Dr. Butler on one side of racism discussion and Larry Elder, if he would accept an invitation, on the other. I propose that since Student Government President Sabrina La Rosa did such a super job, I think that she could be an outstanding host to such a forum. And if handled well, I think it could be good for not only UCF, but the student body and Sabrina as well.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Let's move on to the report of the provost.
Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, senators. I, like President Cartwright, strongly condemn the inflammatory racial views of Dr. Nagy on his personal social media account. These comments are counter to our university's core values of diversity and inclusion. They have outraged, disgusted, and hurt many in our campus community and across the country who are calling for his immediate dismissal. This strong sentiment was echoed during our campus forum on race and unity last week, and we've received hundreds of emails and other messages demanding action. I understand the public outcry and the calls for swift action, but I think you know that action requires due process, a thorough investigation, and careful consideration of what we learn. I do not yet know what path we will follow with Dr. Nagy. We are asking any student, current or former, who's experienced abusive or discriminatory behavior by any faculty or staff member to report it to UCF's Integrity Line or the Office of Institutional Equity. We want to know about it. Many students say they have complained, for example, about Dr. Nagy, but it is not clear to whom they complained and what, if anything, was the result. It may have been in course evaluations. We need to make it easy to bring complaints forward so they can be acted on and eliminate any obstacles to reporting. A few thoughts. People have a First Amendment right to free speech in their private life. As a public university, we're viewed in law as an agency of the government, and we must respect constitutional rights, including private speech. But actions in the workplace, including in the classroom, are a different matter. We can, must take action when there is illegal discriminatory behavior in the workplace, or bullying, or other misconduct. I share the traditional view of free speech, that error should be allowed to be spoken as long as the truth is free to combat it. This is particularly important within a university. Yet, the burden of free speech falls differentially. People with less power, or in minority groups, can be harmed by others' speech in a way that does not happen to people like me, white male in a privileged position. The increasing recognition in modern times of this differential burden highlights our responsibility when speaking to be remembered, as well as our right to speak. In academia, we look at free speech through the lens of academic freedom. I strongly support academic freedom, the importance of allowing faculty to conduct research and to teach as their professional judgment leads them. Here too, there is nuance. Are faculty free as individuals to teach as they want? In our system of shared governance, the curriculum lies predominantly in the hands of the faculty, but it is the faculty collectively, not individually. You, as a group, approve or deny curriculum. Practically speaking, there's greater individual freedom on what is taught, let's say, in advanced electives rather than introductory courses. But academic freedom presumes that faculty are behaving responsibly, basing their teaching and research on the evidence, methods, and reasoning of their discipline. We would not allow someone to base their teaching in an introductory physics course entirely on pre-Newtonian concepts. We'd view that as incompetence. We may need to consider how to decide when an outlying or unwelcome approach to teaching a class is protected by academic freedom or is instead incompetence. This is a slippery slope. In a time when we as a society and university increasingly understand the burdens of systemic racism and other systemic discrimination, we need to examine how we govern ourselves. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Other questions for Dr. Johnson? Seeing none, we will move to our next item, which is the campus response to racism. We begin with a presentation, and I'm sorry, I'm looking at the what's being shared in the Zoom, which is different from what appears on the website as our agenda. So I'm working on the posted agenda.
I will take it down and put up the new one.
Thank you. The presentation is by Dr. S. Kent Butler, our Interim Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity Officer, who I believe will want to share screen. Christine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to have some time with you all. I'm going to start off this presentation with a video that a student and I completed just about a week or so ago. And I think it will lend to the comments I'm going to make and hopefully the discussion that we can have surrounding the things that are going to be showing in this video. It may be triggering for those who are experiencing different things, so I will let you know that up front, and willing to be able to support you in any way and know that there are places on campus that you can go to kind of talk this out if it's not directly with me myself. And so I'm going to share my screen.
And share your audio as well, please.
Yeah, I learned that one. Hold on one second.
While he's setting that up, there is a question in the chat. How do you ask a question? In the participants, and if you click on participants at the bottom, there's a menu of options, one of which is raise hand. And so if you raise your hand, I will see that you'd like to ask a question, and I will try to take the questions in the order that they come, allowing everybody to speak before anybody speaks twice, of course.
All right, so here we go. Thank you. Everything should be okay at this point.
Does anybody hear me? Ooh. Is anybody listening to what's going on? Before we move on, does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me? Is anybody listening? Is anybody listening? How can we change? Hey, before it's too late. Young with dreams, had them for a long time. Well, nothing's impossible as long as you put your mind to it. Sometimes you wanna let go, hold on tight, but you gotta believe with God on your side. Does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me? Is anybody listening to what's going on? Before we move on, does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me? Is anybody listening? Listen to the people. How can we change? Hey, before it's too late. Happy, that's all you ever want to be. Well, knowledge is power. Absorb as much as you need. At times I feel like love passed me by. Just imagine how the kids feel inside. Does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me? Is anybody listening? Is anybody listening? Before we move on, does anybody hear me? Does anybody hear me? Is anybody listening? Listening to me? How can we change? Before it's too late. Before it's too late. Does anybody hear me? You feel you need a friend. Is anybody listening to what's going on? Before we move on. Yeah.
Before I talk, I want to just ask that we have a moment of silence for 8 seconds. The 8 seconds symbolizes the 8 minutes, 8+ minutes that a knee was on the neck of a Black male that's ended in his life being taken from him. It's not easy to have these discussions because, first of all, they've been at the forefront of our life experiences for so long, but we had not been able to give any kind of credence to showing what a person's humanity is and how a person's humanity is taken from them just because someone has a privilege or a perceived privilege over their lives. It's very difficult for me to watch that video. And the reason why is because the images happen to people who look like me and who have been involved with situations that possibly ended in their death, but at the same time ended with their humanity being taken from them. I became a college professor in order to be able to speak to these kinds of atrocities, not to be combative, not to be a person who is sharing half-truths, but speaking to a reality, a truth that is a part of my life and what I would like to engage in conversation with, these very difficult conversations, with the ability for people to open their minds to the what ifs. Because sometimes people want to say, well, I can't imagine. People imagine. The choice is to not be able to put yourself into that space because it hurts. And we cling to, I can't imagine what that's like. I believe that every single person that's watching this knows that they can imagine. And to be able to have the privilege to not imagine is part of the conversation as well. And so I want to open up an opportunity to kind of engage in this process. This may not be the format for that, but the presentation today is to let you know that it's time to move away from silence. It's time to move away from inaction. And when we talk about being an anti-racist, what we're talking about is the allyship of recognizing that this is the truth for too many Americans, too many UCF individuals that we need to kind of rectify. And as I said before, this is not combative. This is really a plea and an opportunity for us to really sit down at the table and help to change the systemic racism that is apparent in almost every place that we go. I've shared with many that every day when I leave my door, I know that I'm walking out into a space as a Black male. And in that space, I have to be at the mercy sometimes of people who have a privilege that they have, that they think they have, that's over me. And then every day when I walk back home and I come into my home and it's a safe haven, that sometimes it's not even a safe haven because someone can come and try to do something to me or my family just because of the color of my skin. So I need you all to feel my humanity. I need you to understand that I'm not coming here just to try to rain on your parade. But I believe that to talk about what is necessary at the university, we need all individuals in on the discussion, recognizing how it really kind of benefits some people over others, the type of privileges that are out there. And I'll give you a scenario of what I'm talking about when I talk about what racism is and what it looks like. I woke up the other morning and I had a thought in my mind with regards to how do I tell white individuals what racism means to me? And I started to think about a car manufacturer, a CEO of a company, who has to then go and recall a part. And they do it very efficiently, right? They reach out and they tell people, look, the engine's gone bad. We need to come back and fix it. Now, liken that to racism. Many times people of color or people from marginalized communities have had to try to fight tooth and nail to get people to hear us and talk about what racism means. But it's maybe not a battle that people of color or marginalized individuals need to be taking on. We can work in conjunction with, but I also think that it's the white community that needs to kind of deal with what racism is in America. So if we take that analogy, the car gets recalled, the engine gets fixed, right? And so you may be the car door. The car door still opens and closes and let people in and out, but you get to the final destination that the engine is taking you towards. And so what I'm asking is that white individuals in our community come together and actually realize that as being a part of that system, a lot of times people say, well, I'm not like that. I don't do that. I don't have these types of attitudes towards these individuals. But being a part of that car, being that car door is a part of that privilege and the things that people are able to achieve and have because of that privilege. So my quest is to ask people to be the headlamp, to shine a light on racism within your community, to help people recognize in that community that the whole car needs to be taken care of. Yes, the engine needs to be fixed, but everything that's within that car, the car seat, the steering wheel, all those things have to come to understand how they benefit from the engine. And together, that's a process. And it's a way to look at what racism really is and what it means and how it affects my life, how it affects the lives of others who look like me and don't look like me, from the trans community, from anywhere that people have disdain towards someone just because of who they are, who they love, and what they represent. And so what I want to engage in is difficult dialogues. I want us to come together and have that space. Zoom is providing a little bit of a platform for this, but there's nothing like human engagement and touching and feeling and understanding together. I promise that these conversations do not end badly. It's an opportunity to listen to voices and to hear where people are coming from, what your life experiences are, how they have affected you, how they have not been beneficial for others, and things along those lines. It's time for us to have this opportunity to talk. In many of these spaces, I may get up and talk, and then what that does is shut down the communication. I've found this so many times in my classes when you want to talk about race relations, when somebody speaks out, then people get silent. There's a sort of fragility and a shaming or a helplessness that I think a white individual has when it comes to that, because they don't feel that they participate in that. And they want to speak to that, but don't want it to turn ugly. And it doesn't turn ugly when you come into it with your open hearts to talk about what this really is. And that's how we make changes. That's how we as a community can come and make systemic changes to something that we say we don't want to be a part of. So if we say we don't want to be a part of it, how do we ally up and help change the narrative? And so with that, I will let you know that I'm here, I'm ready, and it's coming full force to kind of make some really strong sentiments of change here on the campus so that everybody can feel that they are included. Everybody needs to feel like they belong. And when one of us don't feel that way, then we need to be concerned about that. We need to understand that our community is telling everyone that they should be here and that they belong. But if someone is telling you with their fullness that they don't feel that, then we need to do something about that. And it comes from how we recruit, how we retain, and how we actually go about having these difficult dialogues and not running from them. So very recently, we put out a survey, a climate and culture survey, and the results of those surveys are going to be available July 15th. And I want people to be able to look at those and recognize that these are the voices of our community, speaking about how they feel being here on this college campus. And we're going to be able to work with that and create a strategic plan in our movement forward. I like that President Cartwright talks about we should be the model for the nation, for other universities to kind of follow behind. And it's going to take all of us together to be able to do that. It is not my call to say to you all that I'm against us having a community together. I am not fighting against you. I am asking you to fight with me so that people who look like me, people who I am trying to represent, have a space here on this campus. And with that, I'm just going to close out and bring it to any questions or any thoughts that people have. But know that while this is my role, I think it's all of our roles.
Thank you, Dr. Butler. We have Dr. Butler for about another 9 minutes. I'd like to focus the discussion on the things that we can do differently from what we've done in the past, because it's not as though this issue hasn't been on our minds for a long time. And yet I don't see that we're making the kind of impact on it as universities can. And I think a lot of universities are asking themselves the same questions right now. We have something like 70,000 minds in our care for their education, and our job is to teach them how to conceptualize these problems, how to think about racism, how to talk with other people about it, how to identify it in themselves and shut it down, how to work for change in society. I will say something that Dr. Butler said to me in a conversation earlier this week. It may be that many of our students are more on board with this than we are as faculty. And so the education doesn't necessarily need to start with them. I'll open it up to questions. Given where we are in our meeting schedule, I'm going to try to keep our discussion here to roughly 12 minutes, and at about 5 minutes after, we'll go to a statement on racial injustice, and then move to the COVID part of the meeting by 1:15. And hopefully we can do it sooner than that, but I will leave that much time. I see a number of hands. I'm going to go in the order that I see them. Luca Argenti. Unmute, yeah.
Yes, sorry, my cursor is on another screen. Yes, so is it appropriate to also bring remarks from faculty regarding the possible actions to counter racism, or only questions, direct questions to the speakers now?
I think this is our general discussion, but especially if you have questions for Dr. Butler, let's do them before 1 o'clock.
Okay, so I will return back to the remark later then, and I thank Dr. Butler anyway.
All right, Mark Earhart.
I have some comments on the actions that the Department of Psychology is taking in response to this, but I'm happy to defer until after Dr. Butler leaves if others have questions for him before he.
All right, let's ask to clear the hands in the, I will clear the hands in, and just questions for Dr. Butler or responses to his statement. And go ahead and raise hands now. Mason Cash.
Thanks. I mean, just very, very briefly, I teach an introduction to philosophy class where I have a very large audience, and we explicitly talk about racism, white fragility, implicit bias, all these things. It's taken me years to get happy to have those conversations with students. I know many of my colleagues, maybe outside of philosophy, we talk about this all the time, are a little more nervous to have these conversations because we don't have them. We need to have these conversations amongst ourselves about how to work these kinds of things into the curriculum, how to have these conversations amongst ourselves first so that we can get some practice to our students these ways. So I'd like to implore my colleagues to try to find a way to work these kinds of things into your curriculum if it fits, but try to find ways to think about implicit bias and the role it might play in your teaching too. And if there's any way we can set up some conversations or some places to have those conversations over the next couple of months, especially before fall starts, that would be a really good idea, please.
Yeah, I think the thing that to recognize is that this is about self-reflection and understanding who you are and what you bring to the table. And so you can have all the great intentions in the world, but you really have to do some soul searching and see what you are taking in that could be harmful to others outside of your sphere.
Lynn Casimir-Paz. I see a hand from Lynn Casimir-Paz.
Yes, I'm here. I have a question specifically for Dr. Butler, and then I also have some comments and questions just in general about policies going forward. So I'll probably pop my hand up again later, but for Dr. Butler specifically, Dr. Butler, I'm sure you can remember that this is not necessarily cyclical, but it is certainly long-standing, as you mentioned in your comments. Those of us who have been around for a while, I've been at UCF for almost 25 years, we have lived long enough to see that there will be a cycle that appears in popular culture where there is a dialogue, a conversation about race, and then it dies down, and then it happens again, and then it dies down. But certainly for those of us who have been on the front lines of conversations about race, either like Mason Cash or like you, Dr. Butler, have taught this topic in the classroom, may remember that there was a period in the 60s, 70s, and even in the 80s where they approached racism as a conversation that requires a type of therapy. So you've got these sort of encounter groups that can meet on a regular basis with a professional who is the facilitator that can enable certain people who tend to shut down to open up, those who might feel threatened to not feel so threatened. So I'm proposing, Dr. Butler, the idea that perhaps changing the culture of UCF, going toward what Dr. Cartwright has called a sort of social norming, so that we look at racism as a healing process, as a type of therapy, a group therapy, a therapy of the entire campus based upon small encounters. And people can come to these therapy sessions with an openness because they have been reassured about very specific techniques and very specific methods. So it's not just a free-for-all of everybody feeling very hurt and very angry or very defensive. So I propose that as a possibility so we can create a campus climate that social norms the quelling of anxiety and fear around the topic of racism. And so there is a type of openness that can occur, and we can foster this climate of UCF as this oasis of safe spaces for people because we have all been in therapy, right? So, I mean, that's a way of thinking about racism that is old, right? I mean, I remember our church when I was a teenager had these therapy sessions for people looking at racism as a psychological problem that needs treatment, looking at the post-traumatic stress of people who have been traumatized over a lifetime as something that needs a space to heal. And I'm thinking about small groups that meet regularly, and they aren't always led by someone who is known to be activist. Sometimes they're led by someone who is from a faith group or someone who is from, I mean, that's just something that I wanted to propose to you, Dr. Butler, as something to think about, because this is not new. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. This conversation is ongoing for hundreds of years. But in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when I was coming of age, there were ways that we dealt with it. There were people who were very successful in helping racist people come to terms with their own anxieties, their own projection onto other people of the worst in themselves, which is fundamentally part of what racism is, right? A projection. So looking at it that way, I just wanted to propose to you that possibility. And then the second thing for Dr. Butler that I don't know if it's appropriate for you or for the larger UCF community, but a couple of my colleagues have at least one has come very clearly to talk about ways that you, Dr. Butler, are going to work with the police on campus toward some of these solutions as proposed by the larger American sentiment right now. They call it defund the police, But what it really means, and I really regret that choice of words, but what it really means is reallocate resources so the police have very specific responsibilities, and some responsibilities are put somewhere else. So that, for example, when we come to talk about making students wear masks, we don't find that brown-skinned students without masks are disproportionately fined, or brown-skinned students who don't social distance are disproportionately called out by the police. And it is certainly the case, in my experience on campus and the experience of my children, that the police at UCF have, some of them, have a problem. And the problems that my children have experienced on our campus in the past are certainly unique to individuals, bad apples, but certainly what they experienced was facilitated by a problem of the institution of policing at UCF's campus. So I'm wondering, Dr. Butler, A, about the idea of therapy sessions to treat racism as a psychological problem manifest in social behaviors that have killed people. And then secondly, whether you will be working at all with the UCF police to address problems of systemic bias in policing.
I'll start with the second question first and tell you that I've had many conversations with the chief over what University of Central Florida is experiencing, and I have an assurance from him and from others on the police force that they want to work with the university community. There is a sentiment that's out there about police in general that I think is raining down on all police forces. Everyone needs to kind of take a understanding that there are some things that happen that are unfortunate by individuals. And it's the way I feel about the Black community as well. There are individuals that may have done something, but we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater when we're looking for those same protections on other avenues or for other reasons. And so the police know that there's an issue. They know that there are things that they need to work on. We just have to hold them accountable for making sure that that happens. So there will be talks about trainings and doing other implicit bias testing and things that are going to be in the works that I already know that are already happening. And one of the things that we have to do, and I said this before, is that we have to be patient because change is slow, but we have to recognize that there are some things that are happening behind the scenes. There are times that we have to read between the lines of what people are saying to us and recognize that those of us who have some type of positionality are trying to do the right thing. And so, and I think that that's to be said about the police force here on campus, that there are some things that they're working on. There's things that they are knowledgeable about that, you know, are problematic within their force. But at the same time, if we close down the communication to that, then we don't work towards a better good. And so that's really where we want to go. Now, with regards to the first question, I'm here for it. I don't know how to respond to that other than to say that in the spaces that I'm allowed to be in right now, I have used my voice and it's been welcomed. And now it's about accountability there as well. And so I'm just asking us all to keep every one of us accountable. You're seeing us going down the wrong pathway, there needs to be a mention to it. There needs to be a call out so that we can not be in the same type of situation that we're in right now with Professor Nagy. It is important that we don't turn a blind eye to things and think, oh, it'll get fixed or it will be taken care of. We all are responsible. We are all mandated reporters when it comes to racism.
Well, I think maybe I wasn't clear. I think what I was proposing going forward in my first question was that your office would spearhead, which is a really unfortunate metaphor, would create these sort of encounter sessions on a regular basis. So that, for example, as one of my colleagues asked me to mention, you know, the behavior of the downtown police with protesters, you know, was very threatening. A space where the people who felt threatened, who felt that they weren't being protected by the police, that they were being attacked by the police, a space where, like every Thursday at 7, they would come and they would be able to talk that out and be able to be reassured, just precisely what you're saying, that it's not a structural problem, it's just, you know, individuals. But
and those things are in the works. You're
okay.
No, I mean, you went on for a minute, so I might have lost that, but definitely assure you that that is a part of what we've been talking about and what I plan on doing. That's what I've been meaning when I've been saying the difficult dialogues that need to occur. We are setting those up to happen. And also, like I said, we're trying to do it through Zoom, but we understand that it has its limitations. But when we're fully back on campus, and even before, I'm looking to engage in these types of opportunities for sure.
May I suggest that
Sorry, Lynn.
a psychotherapist would be involved? Go ahead, I'm sorry.
We need to move to others' questions. Let's please all try to keep it very brief. Dr. Butler has indicated in a private message to me that he can stick around for a few more minutes. I'm going to take 2 questions if they're short or 1 if it's long. Michael Proctor.
Real quick, that's the first time I heard that there was a problem with our police. Is there some, do you have numbers on incidents that we have with the faculty and staff and the police? I mean, we've got.
So let me just say this. We can get numbers, but we also have to listen to narratives and stories. And so that is the most important part. If is this one of us among us that's having an issue, then we need to look at it. Now, how severe of a look we need to look into it is based on the situation. But I think we're kind of past numbers now.
Okay, I think numbers are going to be extremely important. We're about 26 million interactions, considering we have faculty introducing classes, et cetera. And I was just alarmed about this remark about defunding the police, or this inference that was a possibility. I know that in the police interactions in the riots that we had, our police were pelted with rocks, bricks. Some of the equipment that they were using that was on their faces were knocked off of their faces. It was quite, they were assaulted. They were assaulted.
Can I just say to you that I understand all that, and we see that, and we know that those types of things are happening, but we also have to look at the reason why they're happening. And that is it. So we're not denying any of this. So I'm not turning a blind eye to the fact that those things happened. I'm asking others to not turn a blind eye to why it's happening in the first place.
Luca Argenti, I'll come back to you.
Okay, so thank you very much. I just want to report rapidly a number of points that the physics faculty have brought up regarding these discussions. And many of those points have been covered already by President Cartwright and Provost Johnson and Dr. Butler. So we'll not cover those, but I want to say we think that we have to engage discrimination and diversity with a broadband. In particular, in the case of faculty searches, we should be careful in recommending broad searches, so that in each department, rather than very focused searches, so that the chances of promoting diversity are increased. So there should be guidelines that recommend as much as possible broad searches when the department can support those. Then we believe that there is an issue with segregation at the basis of racism, and therefore we shouldn't just focus on campus, but as a cultural institution, we should reach out to the community that are not contiguous physically with campus, and for example, hold enrichment events repeatedly in the years for the Black and Brown communities, for example, in the inner cities, and maybe using even the new infrastructures that we have there, for example, near Paramore with the on downtown campus. Then regarding the climate in campus, and in particular to cases similar to that of Nagy or any other example of a faculty who is perceived or says things that are overtly racist, in any case problematic. So the response should certainly be some censorship and disciplinary action when warranted. However, we're not just any firm, we are a cultural institution, so we should articulate very well the academic reasons why those points don't stand in front of under scrutiny, right? So it is the colleagues of NEGI, right, not just the administration, who should come up and say why what he says doesn't have a place in academia. The same way as in physics, we would stand up for a colleague that comes up with perpetual motion, right? Something like that. So it is important, it is on us to take that step. And then I wanted also to say something about the police. So we are well aware of the fact that there is violence against minorities, and we should have a discussion, as was highlighted recently, just now, regarding the police in general, and what should be expected of the police on campus in particular. Now, in my experience, all the police people in campus are fantastic people. I've interacted with them very well, but I still remember when I did my orientation 4 years ago, and it is clear in that case there was a climate somewhat tense related to mass shooting, and they had prepared this video that was very, very dramatic, illustrating how we should expect that the worst can happen any moment from any angle, and we should be ready to act with all the violence necessary even to kill. Right? So this sense that we should always be alert that there is a possible assassin among us. And they represented clearly images of suspicious people with a large bag. Where is he going? What is he doing? Now, all this framework was kind of justified by the events then, but it is so clearly biased towards excessive use of force and profiling. And I don't think that any of the people who prepared that material meant anything bad, but it created, even in that classroom, a tension. And if I were a person that would naturally be perceived as non-compliant, you know, in the way you look, I would say, oh my God, I have to be very, very careful, because here they are willing to err in the excessive use of force. So this excessive confidence with violence is kind of threatening. And I say that as a European, we don't have that same kind of climate. And another thing is that I remember coming back from the canteen, there was a lady, a disabled person, who used a motorized wheelchair, and she seemed as if she fainted in the corridor outside. And it was unclear whether she was just sleeping there or whether she was in need of medical attention. So I remember that I ran with a friend to the medical center nearby, the College of Science, and they said, oh, no, we are not going to do anything. Call the police and they will sort it out. And you call the police for a person that seems to be in medical need. And that is another aspect, right? That the police is perhaps presiding over everything, even when other kind of social assistance would be better suited. So I think that police are really trying to do their best. I am not entirely sure that they always are deployed with the best judgment for all the situations. Yes. So that is that, and this last remark is mostly mine, of course.
Thank you, Dr. Butler.
Worthy of looking
We're here for a
into.
minute or two. So this is our last question, or our last. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to respond. I hear where he's coming from, and I think that that's also a part of the discussion. And we have to look at it from all angles. And we have to have all people at the table, because those are the rich voices that help us make the decisions that need to be made. I see in the chat, you know, there needs to be a pathway to leadership for people who are not necessarily sitting at the table. How do we get that to happen and occur? A lot of it is because of implicit bias, and sometimes it's just not acknowledging that there is a need in that regard. So again, those are all things that I think are open to discussion, and the policymakers and the people who are making decisions here on this campus are opening the door to listening to that. And so we have to pick them up on that offer. And to what Lynn has asked, you know, how do we make sure that this doesn't become a secular type of a situation is that we start to make policies and changes in the way that we govern ourselves, and making sure that those things are put into place so that it doesn't allow for something to become circular. It's a stated fact that this is what UCF stands for, that we at UCF are going to make sure that each person who's here is going to recognize that they belong here and have a place. And Joe, I'm quite sure this can go on forever and ever and ever, because that's what the discussion should do. But everything comes to an end, and hopefully the end that we're going to have is one of really changing the systemic racism that's about at the university. And hopefully we can send a message to the greater nation that this is the way to go about doing it.
Thank you. And even though we could have a 4-hour discussion here like we did on May 18th, we won't. I'd like to move to I'd like to thank Dr. Butler for staying and for addressing us in the first place and making extra room in his schedule for us. We'll move now to the statement on racism, and we do need to move with some dispatch here so that we can get to what was originally our main order of business, which is the COVID plan. So Christine, can you project the statement? And Blake, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a draft of a statement that Christine and I put together after asking for volunteers from steering committee. It's been edited once by the Senate leadership. We drew on examples of other statements around the country, including the University of South Carolina's statement against racism and injustice, the messaging from our own leaders here at UCF, and then messages from the experts who've been doing the work in anti-racism. You'll see that the statement kind of goes through a series of moves, including condemnation, as has been said, not just of an urgent issue, but a long-standing issue, a wicked problem in both senses of that word. It's evil and it's persistent and sometimes seemingly intractable. It's a statement of solidarity and support. It's a statement of affirmation of rights, including the right to peaceable protest and assembly, and also constitutional rights, which of course includes the First Amendment. It's a statement of accountability, including our own accountability as educators and thought leaders, but also as members of higher education as an institution. And it's a statement of action, referring to policy. That's part of any anti-racist action, policy, structure, pedagogy, and then our scholarly contributions to public debate. And we're thinking of racism here, not just in intent and content, but also in outcomes. Something is racist if it has racist outcomes. We tried to keep it fairly short. It's around the same length as the South Carolina statement, but we also recognized that there were a lot of things to do in this and that it's hard to capture and maybe sometimes not always responsible to capture a complex problem like this in too short of a response. Thanks.
Thank you. So this statement stands before us. It is not a resolution. Those go to the provost for approval. This is essentially what you might think of as a sense of the Senate. So it's been presented. Do I hear a motion?
Motion
To
whatever you were asking for a motion for. Is this to discuss, to approve?
The motion would be something like to approve this or to adopt this as the sense of the Senate, and that would allow us to discuss it.
Okay, motion to adopt this as a sense of the Senate.
Second.
And I hear a motion, I hear a second. Okay, discussion.
Could we get a copy, please, emailed around to us so we could read it independently if you're scrolling on the screen there, please?
It is on the Faculty Senate website, as is everything for this meeting. If you go to the Faculty Senate website into the meeting materials, for those who are new, you go to the meetings on the Faculty Senate website. The date in that chart is the agenda, and then the box to the right has all the things that are going to be presented or discussed that we know of at the time of the meeting. Is there discussion on the statement? I see Michael Proctor.
I talked about this with, I have 22 members in my department. And so I brought it up to them. I did not have the statement. In that, I only had most of the members, only 7 members gave a response. Most of the members were not on campus. And so most of them were saying, since people aren't here, it's inappropriate for us to vote on a resolution that, heck, we just heard somebody hadn't even read it before. I personally didn't read it before. I don't know that how many people have read it before. And to hastily move forward on such a statement invites a huge number of unintended consequences. Further, I would be in a position if I voted for this of not having the sense of my own department. So, I mean, to have the sense of the Senate would infer that each of the senators has a sense of their department. So if you haven't gotten a sense of your department, I would hope that you would vote no.
Margaret Saho?
Hi. Two things. I think that to remain silent is wrong and is part of the problem. And I think that that's one of the things we're trying to avoid, right? And though I understand your concern about getting a sense of the department, I'm more concerned with a sense of humanity overall. And I think that our president and our provost and our leadership and our university have to make a statement that says, because silence is just wrong. It's just wrong. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm very emotional. I apologize. I support this, and I think it's necessary that we say something. And I don't personally feel I need every single person in my department to say, yeah, we feel the same, because if they don't, then we have a bigger issue than that. And UCF, as in terms of the size and our position, it's our responsibility to say something, in my opinion.
Carol Lucken.
I understand what Michael's saying with regard to a sense of the department. I think what I have a little bit of a problem with is that the statement is not just a statement of values, it's a statement of we're all being condemned. The university is being condemned for, there's sort of this implicit that we haven't done enough and that we're all sort of complicit in racism. And I don't think that's a fair statement. And I think it's possible to make affirmations of our values without, self-flagellation.
Thank you. I will point out 2 things. First, we do expect people to read the materials that go on the website in advance of the meeting. I know this was quickly converted from a steering meeting to a Senate meeting about a week ago, and the statement wasn't there until a few days ago. It is certainly within our parameters to refer this to steering, which is meeting, I believe, June 26th or so, plus or minus a day in advance of our July 9 meeting. So we have processes to handle this. I do think we need to get onto the COVID discussion. I will, I would entertain a motion to refer it to steering. I would entertain motions to amend it, but we are at the time we have for discussing it.
I think the motion was made and seconded, and we should vote. I'm actually kind of shocked that there's not support for a solidarity statement from the faculty senate.
There are a number of hands, and we're sort of in a dilemma here, right? We have 35 minutes to do what was originally the main the main business of the meeting. So I can, if nobody makes a different motion, we will move to a motion on, we'll move to a vote on the statement as it stands.
Point of order, I don't think the chair can call the question on a motion. That has to come from the floor.
That's right. But I can also cut it off for lack of time and debate, which is where we are. So we don't automatically vote if the time has run out. I'm looking now because I do think we have additional people who want to speak. We have at least half a dozen or so hands in the participants. And we have to get to COVID. How about we do this? We will let us move to the COVID discussion, and at 10 minutes before 2, which will give people enough time to read it if anybody hasn't read it, we will look at we'll look at it again. So we'll pick up discussion again at 10 minutes before 2. That will at least give everybody a chance to read it thoroughly. So at this point, Dr. Johnson has a presentation.
Would you like me to do it, or would you like just to skip the conversation or discussion, Chair Harrington?
I think you said it. How long is what you prepared?
Let me skip to the essence, and I think it's 5 minutes.
That would be good, and that'll keep us focused.
All right, so let me talk about our main plan. Please recognize that the plan has contingencies. So what I'm going to present is the plan that will occur unless there's a deterioration in health in Central Florida. If that occurs, we'll move in other directions, including the possibility of even going entirely online if directed by health authorities or if the circumstance deteriorates. This plan is based on an expectation of a continued return to campus and normality in Central Florida. So the plan, therefore, goes as follows. Some classes will be on campus. In those classes, students will be seated at least 6 feet apart. They and the faculty will wear face coverings, and there will be other required health guidelines. To maintain this distance, small classes have to move into larger classrooms. A consequence of that is that there's not room on campus for as many classes as we would ordinarily offer face-to-face. Colleges right now are finishing the key step in this main plan, which is to determine which classes should be taught on campus and which moved to fully remote. And these were the guidelines they were asked to follow to prioritize the quality of the educational offering. Therefore, first, to identify the courses which most need a face-to-face component to provide a high-quality experience, performing arts, many other classes. Secondly, conversely, to identify courses in which a fully developed web version is available with fully trained faculty. And then after these, we ask them to prioritize providing on-campus classes for first-time in college students, because we know that the campus experience is important for these students' retention and success. We expect to have the new modalities and the new locations, because classes are moving to bigger rooms, in the registration system by July 1st. We know that some clinical classes, for example, require close contact with human subjects. These programs are developing different safety measures, including full PPE for everyone. A consideration here is that classes with more than 100 students have to either be taught remotely or instead offered in a flexible blended model where only a subset of the class is present on any given day. So classrooms will be cleaned daily, and students and faculty will be asked to take personal responsibility to clean their own seats or workstations using disinfectant wipes that'll be provided. This is in line with CDC and other recommendations. One challenge is that students may fall ill or be placed into quarantine, and we will ask faculty teaching courses with an on-campus component to include flexible options for these students. And we also need plans in place in those classes in case we do suddenly switch to entirely remote instruction. So we've installed equipment and are still installing equipment to make flexible teaching as easy as possible, including webcams, microphones, and software, including Zoom and Panopto. And Digital Learning has prepared guidance and training to try to make this as easy as possible. A little bit more. Faculty at higher risk should teach remotely. Forms allowing self-identification are coming from HR to colleges and faculty. And there's a problem with the title. HR named it a pandemic survey because that was the name that EEOC uses. But it's not a survey to solicit percentages of people who want to do what. This is the form that we are using to find out who is self-identifying as at high risk or as having dependent care issues. So please fill that form out and submit it. And I do need to acknowledge that faculty who are not at higher risk may be assigned on-campus teaching. It may be possible to consider faculty preference, but we can't guarantee preference at this time. The last week of classes after Thanksgiving and final exams will be offered remotely. Campus is going to remain open. We're not trying to shut down, but planning this now allows us to be prepared for something that epidemiologists have suggested, which is a resurgence in late fall or early winter. This will keep us from having to make a sudden decision the way we did over spring break. Gives people time to plan. Some details are being worked out. Among the many task forces underway is a group thinking about things like standard approaches or a script if students don't want to comply with the requirements of face coverings or physical distancing. I do want to thank everyone for your work since spring break. This has been an amazingly challenging time. And I also will ask you to maintain the spirit of a desire to help your colleagues and your students, along with a willingness to be flexible in the coming months. This is quite a challenging period for our country and our university. Thank you, that's it.
All right, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Christine, would you project the Google Doc that you have prepared to capture what people say here? And I see the chat is active with comments on the previous discussion, and that's great. I want to focus the discussion here, not to points of clarification. We've had several opportunities for that, including the open forum yesterday, but to things that we want to see changed, if any. We have a little bit of opportunity. I don't know exactly when the plan goes to the board, but it's on the board agenda for a week. As a Board of Trustee member, I can take amendments to the board and propose them there. And of course, if I were to do that, I would work with the administration to see if we can come up with something agreeable. But in order to do that, I have to know what people are looking for. So I cleared the hands from the previous discussion, and I recognize Robin Back.
Sorry, just unmuting myself. Yes, I represent faculty at the Rosen College, and I have 4 concerns that have been raised by our faculty in this return to campus plan. One is that it is stated that COVID-19 testing will be readily available on main campus and at the Lake Nona Medical Campus, but not at the Rosen campus. Can the Rosen campus also be included?
Good and important question. Thank you. Let me figure it out. I don't know today. We will figure that out.
Thank you.
And downtown and.
Right. Second one concern was looking at the social distancing requirements for our spaces and classrooms in the return to campus plan. And given that COVID-19 spreads more virulently in enclosed environments, it seems aggressive to put that many students in an enclosed space. can a mechanism be included for faculty to be able to push back on the allowances if it is felt that too many students are permitted into a space to remain safe?
Well, I'll tell you that we are really trying to follow very closely the guidance from CDC and other medical authorities, including our own medical lead, Dr. Dyken. And I think we are abiding by the guidance that we're getting, and that is our goal. If it changes, we'll try to change with it. But I looked away and I'm stuttering a little to try to say this with respect. I am not an epidemiologist. I read the newspapers. I get concerned at individual things myself, and I think we all do. But I don't think it's possible to let this be a collection of individual decisions on the part of all of us, how we operate the courses this semester. So, you know, I don't think that's a very satisfactory answer, but I also think it's true. We will certainly try to change with changing guidance from CDC and others. I know that our HVAC people are working on improving the filters. I know that there's ultraviolet lights going into certain buildings in the HVAC systems. I don't have all the details in front of me here. We can get some of that for you later if you'd like.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. The next concern that was raised on page 11 of the Return to Campus Plan, it stated that an emergency university policy was developed and that it will live online, but we don't see where that policy is, as non-compliance may result in disciplinary action up to and including dismissal. We're concerned that the actual policy is not there or doesn't appear to be available.
I suspect it will be up soon. The last time I saw it, it was a draft, pretty close to adoption. I'm certain before it's adopted and once it's adopted, it'll be available online. All of our policies get posted before they're adopted. I'm sure that's the case here. They might not be up yet today.
Okay, thank you. And the last point that came up was that there was concern that there's no mention of how the added costs of faculty who have to work from home will be covered, such as stationary supplies, high-speed internet, computers, webcams, etc.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think that certain things are reasonable to expect to be provided by your employer, you know, and that includes, if you have to teach online, a computer with a camera. I haven't really seen much. I know that we have some students who are really suffering from an inability to have the equipment that they need to learn appropriately in this environment. I really hope that faculty who are running into that problem have already spoken up, and I hope they will soon. If they know they're going to be teaching remotely this fall, but also to be prepared. We want to be in a position so that if we do have to pivot, we can do it well. And if somebody can't pick up their class remotely because of their computer on their desk or something, we'd really like to address that in advance. So please bring it up with your chairs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. I see Michael Proctor had his hand up early.
Yes, can the face mask be substituted? Can you substitute for a face mask a face shield if you're teaching? One of the individuals brought up the issue that he has asthma. He's been attempting to teach with his mask on over the summer. You know, it's testing, he has issues with it. And so the question is, can he use a face shield as opposed to a face mask?
Can I pause?
Dr. Harrington, can I take this question?
I was just going to say that because I should have thrown the earlier one at you as well, Dr. Dyken. Thank you.
That's all right, Dr. Johnson. So this is a really interesting question. Until recent months, the assumption has been that face shields provide very little protection for things like influenza and COVID. But recently there was published in JAMA an article that shows there actually is a level of protection for both the wearer and those in the environment. it's my belief it's not as great as face coverings, but we are working with legal and HR. We just had this discussion yesterday as it relates to policy to allow for a very small subset of our population to substitute face shields for face coverings. Because this approach isn't widely recognized, the bar is somewhat high. I think what you're describing is someone with documented asthma who otherwise could not teach and needs to be on campus. The first opportunity would be to stay at home and teach remotely. But if there was a need to be present, then a face shield would be a reasonable accommodation. It's very interesting.
All right, I'll pass that on. The issue, some of the faculty received grievances from students. And one of the grievances was the sense that the university is being cheap on refunding parking for this past year, in light of the fact that the university has received federal funding in fairly large amounts. Is there a possibility that students will be refunded a portion of their parking fees that they paid this past year?
So I think Mary Beth Ehas is here. I'll just say, I think we've probably handed out all of the CARES Act funding to students, and we followed the guidelines we were given. Mary Beth, if you're here, can you comment on this, the CARES Act part? I suspect that means she's no longer here. So I said the part that I know best, which is that students were given an opportunity to apply for CARES Act money. We followed the guidelines from the U.S. Department of Education in determining how to hand that out. I think that money is now or is still now getting into the students' hands. I don't believe—
Mike, here I am.
Thank
Here I
you.
am. Sorry, I was having some difficulty with unmuting. The CARES Act money is moving into students' hands, but there is funding that is still available, and we will be putting forward a second round of requests. So that would be an opportunity for students to, they're having some continued financial difficulty or didn't receive all that they wanted in the first round, that they certainly could apply for that again.
Okay, so the answer is to apply for it. All right, the last question I had then, because I see you were short on time, let me move rapidly forward, was the issue on when the number of dorms will be available for students. Because the students are concerned that they may not be able to get access to dorm rooms, and then they'll have to go out on the market, and they don't know if they want to take a long-term lease with the market, if in fact we have a second or a third round of coronavirus, and then they'd be stuck with a one-year lease, or wait and then try to find a room which open up to the general public, and then they end up not having anything.
I can answer that as well, if that's okay with everyone.
I'm going to jump in here. These are implementation details. I'd like to focus on amendments to the plan, because we can clarify these issues. We can certainly address them with the students, but in order to change this plan that's going to the Board of Trustees next week, we need to know what people actually want to see changed. So I'd like to just hear questions related to changes to the plan, because we've got about another 7 minutes. Kelly Semrad, I'm sorry, Michael Proctor, do you have more things that suggest changes to the plan?
No, I've given you what I had.
Thank you. Kelly Semrad. You have to, there you go.
I would like to ask if we could make an amendment to the plan that references how many this is with regards to resources, I guess. If you're teaching an online class, whether it be a V or a W, or if it's mixed mode and it gets migrated to being online, if we can have an amendment within the return to campus that says how many students can be in a section before a GTA must be assigned to assist that faculty member with grading.
Do we have that now for our regular online classes? I see.
No, it's by department.
Okay, well.
I can address that a little bit if you want, Chair Harrington.
Who is this?
This is Tom Cavanaugh.
Go ahead, please.
It's really departmentally dependent. Every department has had sort of different policies and resources in order to staff GTAs. And I'm not aware of any courses being set at higher caps this fall because of going remote than what they would have ordinarily had. I have not heard that.
All right.
Well, can I just comment? We have Tom, you know, the adjuncts that would customarily teach, or the PhD students that may customarily teach some of the courses, they're not certified to teach online. So when we moved some of the sections this summer to online and they weren't able to instruct those students that were enrolled in those sections had to be distributed to other sections. And so we saw a jump in enrollment in other course sections, which resulted in, and I'm speaking on behalf of Rosen College, I don't know what it has been in the other colleges, but we saw a jump in enrollment in those other sections. And so we ended up having faculty members grading double the amount of students that they had initially enrolled. And maybe that's just a summer issue, I'm not sure. But you know, I think it's just something that is important to address because it impacts the quality of the educational experience that the student is able to receive when, you know, when there's a large amount of students that are online and the professor is trying to respond to all of them while teaching other classes, while also doing research and service. It's so if we have that threshold number from a university perspective as a policy, I think that it could help improve an online educational experience in the event that UCF has to migrate to online platforms again.
Yeah, I'll defer to Provost Johnson, but at UCF, what is considered a large class or a threshold that might require a GTA has been typically considered very disciplinary specific, like a writing intensive course versus something that might be more quantitative, that a computer could potentially grade more easily. So what those numbers might be set at a kind of a disciplinary level as opposed to something across the board, but I'll defer to the provost.
Maybe an idea would be to have each department set that level before hitting that decision. Reed Ochin.
I just wanted to, I think the plan is fairly comprehensive. However, the one piece that my colleagues saw missing was the fact that there's no required training for students and the required temperature checks that we're seeing at so many different places, activities. We're not seeing that part of the plan. I'm just wondering why those two pieces might not be included in the plan to the BOD and the BOG.
Mary Beth, are we planning required training for students? I thought we were, but that's why it's a question.
We are planning required training for students.
Thank you. And Dr. Dykin, can you comment on the other part?
Temperatures.
Temperature checks.
You have to unmute.
So we are going to have temperature checks in our clinical spaces. The temperature checks have questionable benefit with mass screening. Instead, what we're doing is we are creating an app, a web-based solution where students, faculty, and staff will do daily screens. The screen for symptoms of COVID, the screen for exposure to COVID, that screen for recent travel to areas where COVID is in high prevalence. Persons who screen positive for these areas would be linked with services, and for employees, their supervisor would be made aware. of the situation. So we're going about it in a different way than with temperature checks, which have some questionable benefit, but we found a way that we can connect with everyone through the use of technology.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to take one more question, then we will go back to the statement on racism. I think I saw Mason Cash before I saw Luca Argenti. Go ahead, Mason.
Very briefly, I see a lot of mention about training for faculty before we come back to campus, training for online courses or for using the new technology in the classroom for hybrid. I'm not seeing much about support for training, particularly if we're asking faculty who are not on contract right now to spend a decent amount of time preparing to come back in the fall. What are we doing to entice faculty to actually take that training rather than just making it available? I'm going to have a few obstreperous colleagues I know who are going to resist being made to do anything while they are not on contract.
Tom, can you comment?
Yes, at least for the training associated with online instruction, going remote instruction, or the blended flexible instruction, the one that requires the most time from faculty, something we're calling Essentials of Online Teaching. It's very much like our IDL 6543 course that some of you are familiar with, because it is rigorous and it does have an expectation of 3 weeks to complete. There is a stipend of $500 for faculty for successfully completing that. The other training that we are putting together has much lower time thresholds. Like, for example, the workshop that we're planning for blended flexible, we're looking at something like an hour or two for faculty. The teaching with lecture capture course was a couple of hours over a week that was expected. But the one that has the highest expectations for faculty does come with a stipend.
I would point out that $500 doesn't pay anybody for 3 weeks.
Yeah, recognize that.
That might actually be less than minimum wage.
It's not expected 8 hours a day either. It's conducted over 3 weeks, just to clarify.
Let's move back to our, thank you for Dr. Dykin, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Ehaz, and Dr. Kavanaugh, thank you, sorry. Let's move back to our discussion, and let me parameterize the discussion here. We have a motion on the table. We have about 8 minutes to decide what to do with this. We can amend it. We can refer it to the steering committee or another committee, although the other committees are not active at this point. We can table it and we can vote on it. The procedure, if you think that it ought to get voted, is to call the question, and then we have a vote on whether to vote, and then we have a vote. And alternatively, you can, if you don't want it to be voted on, you can make one of the other motions, but the ultimate motion to dismiss is the vote. So with that, I will recognize, let's see, I see Reed Och and I see Margaret Zaho. Reed, is this your hand still up or is this a new hand up?
Different hand, but to talk about the motion on the table.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's important that we take action. And the one concern I heard from Carol Lukin and Mike Proctor is the fact it's the paragraph starting, we acknowledge that the work is done at institutions, blah, blah, blah. I believe if we take out the including UCF to the end of that sentence, I think that takes out the what I think Carol called self-flagellation. But I think it's important as a faculty that we address this issue as soon as possible. And so my preference would be if we want to amend this very quickly, we do so, but I think it's a very well-written and complete document.
Thank you. Christine, can you please share it? It disappeared. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm going to put it into the Word document so I can make the edits.
Okay. So don't make edits until we've moved on them, but you
Okay.
can put them in the suggestions with a highlight or something like that. Stephen Collins.
Thank you. Really quickly, I want to say that I certainly don't feel the need to poll my colleagues and on whether or not they support an anti-racism statement. And we're never going to be able to get agreement on every single word. So I feel comfortable voting. I will say, because I think it's important that we send a message, I will vote for an imperfect statement if that's all that time allows. I do have concerns about the second to last statement, second to last sentence. But having said that, I will call the question.
The question has been called. I still see hands up. Is there a second to calling the question?
Yes. I can't.
I heard something, but it wasn't clear. Did somebody second the motion to call the question?
Second.
All right, the question has been called. That's a move to cut off debate. So senators, vote yes if you wish to stop debating and vote on the motion. This is not your vote on the motion. This is the motion to stop debate. If you wish to continue debating, click no, and that's the red X. And I'll remind everybody we are 5 minutes before our time. So a green is to vote now, and a red is to keep talking.
Point of information, if there is a vote to call the question, are we voting on the amendment that was just suggested, or are we ignoring that?
That's a good point.
Wouldn't it have had to have been seconded, the amendment?
And I didn't call for a second. So let me back up then. I'm going to tell everybody stop voting. I'm going to clear the amendment. The amendment was to remove including UCF, I believe. Is there a second to that motion?
Point of order.
Yes.
Was that presented as an amendment, a proposed amendment, or just a concern?
That would be, I also failed to call it an amendment, but I would say that's a friendly amendment to the document.
Yeah, I'll remind people we don't have friendly or unfriendly amendments. They're just amendments. So the proposed amendments, can you put that that section of the document on screen, please, Christine?
The second to the last.
We recognize. I don't see.
Hold on.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
There it is. So it's the last complete paragraph. So we acknowledge that work done at institutions of higher education, including UCF, has contributed, et cetera. The motion is to remove including UCF. Do I hear a second? So for lack of a second, we don't have a motion to discuss.
Sorry, I was seconding it. I forgot to unmute.
All right, we have a second on that motion. We have discussion on the motion. Mason Cash.
Just very briefly, including UCF is explicitly trying to refer to Charles Nagy. There is some work being done at UCF that we are explicitly calling out and saying we need to address. That statement needs to be there. And we'd be tone deaf if we removed it.
Okay. Christine, please put it back. We haven't removed it yet. So it says including UCF. You can highlight it or something.
And just to add to my statement, it also says UCF is doing work to counter inequalities and systemic racism. We can't be ignoring that either.
Right. I'm going to take two more questions and then, or two more quick statements, and then move to the calling of the question, which we have heard. Adam Parrish.
I agree. The statement including UCF has to stay. I would much rather vote for an imperfect statement than one that says that we have no complicity in racist actions.
If I can say, it doesn't say that they're not complicit in, it's saying that we're perpetuating inequities and systemic racism. That's a pretty strong statement.
I believe we are.
Institutions of higher education perpetuate systemic racism.
I believe they do, and I believe we do.
Well, I don't believe they do.
Those are our two comments. We had a motion call question. And I'm going to call this question. So the amendment, we're voting on the amendment. Vote yes if you favor removing including UCF. Vote no if you oppose removing including UCF. Okay, at this point, I see the votes as 7 in favor and 33 opposed. So the motion fails. We had a motion to call the question. We are also at our time. I have not heard a motion to dismiss of the statement any other way. So we will move to vote. I am clearing all. Those in favor of approving the statement as it stands, vote yes with green. Opposed, vote no with red. And the reason I'm not moving to the call.
Don't we have to vote on, before we vote on the amendment, vote on the statement, don't we have to vote on calling the question?
We are at our time.
Okay.
And there was no other motion to dispose of the motion. So we have ended debate by time. This is the motion, the vote on the motion.
I'm sorry, this is actually an incredibly important document that we're getting ready to put forward. And I don't think it should just be ended because we've run out of time.
We had our opportunity to do other things like refer it to committee.
No, because we've been rushed back and forth. And I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this is an important statement. This is something that's in the New York Times. I wake up and I see. So I think we do have to, flesh this out. And I'm willing to give, I don't think it's going to take more than 30 minutes. I'm willing to give 30 more minutes of my time to make sure we have this right.
We have a
so can we make a motion to extend our time by 30 minutes so we can approve a document?
I'm sorry.
That
I need to cut this off.
Okay.
I'm sorry. There was a time to make that motion, and that time ended 2 minutes ago.
Joe, can I, this is Kelly Sumrad. Can I make a motion to move this to steering so that the statement can be refined?
No, you may not. You had that opportunity, and I said at 5 minutes of, I said we have the following options. Okay, we have a meeting with a timed ending.
Well, the fact of the matter is I had my hand up and you did not recognize me. I was going to offer that motion and you went before I could even, I was waiting to be recognized.
I hear that.
This is absurd. If you would have looked at.
Got an order, Joe.
I'm sorry. We have a vote. The vote currently stands 33-7. There are still a number of people who have not voted. We're at 36-9. So I think we have a clear, I'd even say a very strong majority. So the motion carries. This is the statement of the Senate. Hearing the final discussion here, there are documents that have been circulated in the past about parliamentary procedure. I will work on revising those and sending those out to people because I think we will hit this again and again, right? The meeting last time went 4 hours. And that one was the first time we had heard about the COVID debate or the COVID plans from the administration. They agreed to stay and we agreed to stay. In this meeting, I have tried to stay to our time. We are slightly over our time already. I do hear the colleagues who say, we wish we had more time. We wish we could make this more perfect. But at the same time, we do have an overwhelming majority here at this point, 38-9 in favor of the statement. So the statement stands as the voice of the Faculty Senate. And I believe that is the end of our business. It is. And so
Point of
we
information,
are.
a further motion that's improved further can be reintroduced at a later meeting if anybody wants to improve it further, right?
Because this is a sense of the Senate, this is right now our statement. You can always revise what statement we have made. So someone could at a future meeting say, I wish to revise the statement we have made. And then effectively, this was the statement that was in effect from here until that meeting, and then you would change it. It might look a little strange to do that, but it's certainly allowed to do it. All right. I want to thank everybody for your participation here and in the summer. Some people have asked in the chat, why are we doing this in the summer? And the answer is we voted on it at the May 18th meeting. And so that's why we'll continue to have these discussions. Please keep talking about these issues in your departments and with students and staff. And we welcome your feedback for further discussion. Next steering meeting is in the last week of June. And we'll be picking up on both of these issues, because the COVID plan, even though it will be at the bog at that point, it's a live document and it's a live situation. And so we'll continue to be engaged in it. And of course, we've barely scratched the surface on racism. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Well done.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.